You know, in Effingham, you had your property taxes go way up. In Hampton, I had my property taxes go way up. And in part, this is because we lived in a state that continues to downshift its costs of operating, things that the state should be paying for, onto local taxpayers. And so I think that a couple of the things that I would recommend and what I'm seeing be really effective at the local level is rezoning for redevelopment. So this idea of building residential units within commercial zones. Another thing that I think is really important, and one of the ways I see federal policy that's not just housing policy helping to address our housing crisis in New Hampshire, is our education policy. So one of the reasons that our taxes, our property taxes, and the cost of living in New Hampshire is so high is because, you know, in terms of sources of revenue, the state relies largely on local property taxes. And this is a state that is 50th in the country when it comes to funding for public education. Literally last, after all the other states. And yet we're also a state that spends more money than almost any other state in the country on educating our students. And so that means that students who live in property wealthy communities have a lot more access to better education, to educational facilities, to teachers, to extracurriculars that other people don't have. And so one of the things that is a big driver of costs for our public schools is healthcare. So one of the reasons when I launched my campaign, I came out in support of Medicare for All, is because healthcare costs so much for our communities to cover. And if we had a single payer healthcare system in this country, that means that local property taxpayers wouldn't have to pay all of the costs of healthcare for all of their teachers and their state and municipal employees by themselves. We could share those costs. Another major driver of costs in our public school system, and therefore a major issue when it comes to raising our taxes in New Hampshire, is the cost of special education. All of our students deserve an adequate education. They all deserve a good education that meets their needs, that prepares them for life in a democracy. And right now we live in a state where the burden of paying for special education, which can really vary from year to year and cost communities up to $1 million for a student, depending on their placement needs. The schools districts are paying for that themselves. And this is a piece of legislation that was passed by our federal government. And our federal government has an obligation to pay for the laws that they pass, but instead they pass the buck to us. And so two of the things that I think beyond the housing policy changes that we discussed here that would have an impact at the local level are federal policies when it comes to education, things that a lot of us already agree on, and in one case are already law. We just need to see it exercised, the people in power to use their power to make things a little bit better for all of us.